I got a text from Patty that she is unable to, she's on permanent mute.
Patty is?
Yes.
Let me check. Can fix that. Let's see. Attendee. Patty. Here. Can allow to talk. Julia allowed to talk. Rakesh allowed to talk. Yeah. Okay.
Patty says she can hear it, so.
Okay. Yeah, I've allowed Patty to be able to talk. That I can do.
Yeah, is it working now? Looks
Yeah.
like it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
The video, I'm still having
No
problems.
problem.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
Yeah, no worries. You don't need to see me.
All right, I received no non-agenda public comments, so we can call the meeting to order and proceed with your presentation.
Next slide. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alex Frost, project manager for the Miramichi Community Plan Update. With me today, we have Tanner French and Claudia Brazella from Sustainability and Mobility Department, senior engineers, and Amy and Yari from Kimberly Horn Associates. Next. The agenda is 4 parts. I'll briefly go over the Mira Mesa schedule and then pass it on to the mobility team for presentation on the mobility vision and future mobility conditions and next step. Next. In terms of the schedule, so today's meeting and the mobility analysis proceeds the recommended land use and the land use alternative. And so we've inputted those land uses to the mobility modeling, and today's presentation is the result. We are planning to have a community discussion draft in January, and then in March is discuss the advisory committee input on the community discussion draft. Next. So I'll pass it on to Tanner.
Great. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see you. It's nice to meet you all. As Alex said, I'm Tanner French. I'm a senior traffic engineer in the city's sustainability and mobility department. And we really do thank you for joining us tonight. We understand that there's a lot going on, and especially tonight, it seems. There is a lot of information to get through, but there's really only 2 main sections to tonight's presentation. First, I'm going to walk everybody through kind of an overview of the mobility vision, and that will hopefully explain our mobility philosophy and methodology and process. And second, Amy and Yari from Kimberly Horn and Associates, our mobility consultant for the project, are going to walk you through our future mobility conditions analysis. So the mobility goals established for Mira Mesa and for the plan update are really to connect the community by expanding personal mobility options, and that's mainly through a robust active transportation network that is safe, to improve transit by providing infrastructure or right-of-way allocations to improve transit travel speeds and make transit a viable option, and also to modernize mobility by using, and more importantly, setting the system up to utilize future technologies that improve efficiencies. Running parallel to those mobility goals are strategies for each of the 4 travel modes. For transit, to reiterate, we want to make transit a competitive and reliable option for residents, visitors, and employees. If we can't make travel times competitive to driving a car, there's no incentive for people to take transit. For bicycles, we want to create a network of separated bike facilities for the little bit longer trips, while supplementing that with parallel low stress routes for the more local trips in order to accommodate all ages and abilities. For pedestrians, we want to enhance walkable connections for everyone in the community and to allow people to walk for a majority of the short trips. And lastly, for vehicles, we want to maximize the roadway efficiencies using advanced technologies. So in terms of a collaboration, community planning requires the intentional and simultaneous integration of land use and mobility to ensure a successful plan. To use an example of the previous slide, I stated we want to make pedestrian trips available for the majority of those short trips. But no matter how good the pedestrian infrastructure is, that's not possible if there aren't places to go that are within walking distance. So mixed use developments and community-oriented land use work hand in hand with the mobility strategy. Throughout tonight's presentation, we'll be comparing mobility results from our future recommended and future alternative land use options to the existing and to the adopted plans. So here we're showing the difference in the number of residents and employees between the recommended and alternative that were used in our land use slides. And so before Claudia moves it forward, we'll just, we'll kind of give you 10 seconds to kind of look at those and just see the kind of the magnitude of the numbers that we're talking about. And I'm sure you've seen these in previous presentations that Alex has provided. Okay, hopefully that's enough time because we are so short on time tonight. So working in conjunction with our land use plans is our modeling process. We take the land use inputs and run them through Sandag's travel forecast model. The modeling is a detailed process, which we've worked on with Sandag's staff for the better part of 6 months. Ultimately, the model provides outputs, including average daily trips, transit ridership, and mode share splits. Amy and Yari will get into much more details regarding those model outputs and how it relates to our analysis. But one of the pieces of information that we do get from the model and that really underscores the land use and mobility dynamic is shown on this slide. From the model, we can understand travel patterns and specifically travel patterns of employees in and out of Mira Mesa. This slide shows a comparison of those employee travel patterns across the existing and future recommended and future alternative scenarios. The orange arrow shows employees coming into the community for work. The gray arrow shows employees who already live in the community and therefore their trip stays in the community. And the red arrow shows employees leaving the community. So of particular note is the major increase in the number of people living and working in Mira Mesa. That is the number of employees that are staying in the community. For the existing condition, that was around 7,500 employees. In the recommended and alternative plans, this is almost 30,000 and 26,000 employees respectively. That's a lot due to the increase in mixed use development intensity. So just underscoring that tying of land use and mobility. So switching gears just a little bit, the next part of the mobility vision and methodology that we wanted to note has to do with the constraints that we're working with in this process. This slide shows a good example of the constraints and the decisions that we make given those constraints. The top row of this slide shows the existing cross-section for Mira Mesa Boulevard, the western portion of it. As you can see, the right-of-way is 102 feet and the roadway accommodates vehicles and bikes. In the second row, we've shown the cross-section, what the cross-section would look like if everything fit. If we were able to get bikes in there, if we were able to keep all the travel lanes, and we integrated separated transit. This would require roadway widening of 24 feet. Typically, roadway widening is not very feasible and it's very expensive. Also, widening is not in line with the city's climate action plan goals, as widening almost always increases vehicle miles traveled and creates less safe conditions at the intersections if pedestrians are having to cross 124 feet rather than something that's not so wide. Ultimately, what we do is make trade-offs and compromises considering all the factors that I've discussed in the previous slides. The third row shows our proposed cross-section. The recommendation fits within the existing right-of-way, which is our constraint, while being responsive to the modal needs that I've discussed previously. And then this graphic really just kind of, which we've probably shared in previous presentation, really helps illustrate that dynamic of moving more people. Using other modes of travel can alleviate congestion on the roadways by moving more people with less space. The graphic shows the amount of roadway space it takes to move the same amount of people via car, bike, and bus. In a built-out community like Mira Mesa, we need to look at how we can move residents and employees more efficiently by dedicating roadway space to higher occupancy modes of transportation. So as I try to quickly wrap up my portion of the presentation, I want to make a note on vehicular analysis method. This topic is something that I could probably spend an hour or more describing, and we don't necessarily have that time tonight. But in essence, analyzing using level of service metric evaluates intersections and roadways at a microscopic level by literally analyzing each one of them individually. It calculates the delay using the number of vehicles entering the intersection or the roadway. And the vehicle miles traveled metric analyzes the whole mobility network kind of at a more macroscopic level by evaluating how many trips are being made and multiplying that by the distance of each trip. And again, Yari and Amy will kind of get into, looking at those metrics, but I wanted to give a preface to kind of, what we're talking about in that realm. And the change between level of service and vehicle miles traveled is really notable for a couple of reasons. Importantly, it's now state law that we use the vehicle miles traveled metric to analyze and not use the level of service metric. Now, we can still use level of service in our planning process. It's just not really backed by state law. And also, analyzing using the vehicle miles traveled metric candidly allows for recommendations that aren't necessarily centered directly around improvements for vehicles only. So with that, that introduction of our mobility vision, I'll pass it over to Amy and Yari from Kimley Horn and Associates. But before I do, I just want to give a quick overview of how their presentation is structured. As I stated earlier, there is a lot of information. We're about a quarter of the way through. However, the information is hopefully organized in a manner that should be relatively easy to follow. What they'll be doing is walking through the future mobility conditions for all four modes. And in each of those sections, they'll describe how we analyze that mode, what the existing conditions are for that mode, what recommendations we're making for that mode to make it better, and what the analysis looks like after that's done. So with that, I'll pass it over to Amy and Yari for the future mobility conditions.
Thank you, Tanner. Mobility. Resulting conditions after implementation. Next slide, please. This slide shows the daily mode share percentages. The model results indicate a lower dependence on vehicle trips within the community and an increase in active transportation trips for both recommended and alternative scenarios compared to the adopted. Next slide. This next slide shows the peak period mode share percentages for the three scenarios. You can see that the dependence on single occupancy vehicles is much higher during the peak as compared to the full day. But there's still a substantial number of trips that are anticipated to be converted to transit, walking, biking, and carpooling as a result of the proposed transportation network. The mixed-use developments are proposed for the community will really help with converting short trips to these alternative modes.
Not to interrupt, but that shows only a tiny increase in transit, even with everything you're doing. Is that right? 7% to 8%?
Can you go back to that slide?
Mm-hmm.
We'll be answering questions at the end of the presentation, but
Okay.
yes, there is, this is the adopted scenario. So this is a proposed transit is included in here as well. As Tanner mentioned, we use VMT as a metric for analyzing the future models. we'll also be showing you travel time runs for some of the major corridors to answer the question, what does this mean for me? It's a more personable metric telling us how long it would take to travel through the community. Here we have the proposed vehicle network that many of you have seen before. We have proposed smart corridors, adaptive traffic signals, flexible lanes, freeway congestion improvements, traffic calming enhancements, transit signal priority, and a new proposed roadway alignment on Carroll Canyon Road, which the traffic study for that should be wrapping up by the end of the year.
Can you define flexible lane?
Yes, flexible lane is a transit, it's like a transit lane, but it could also be a high occupancy vehicle lane. So dedicated to transit, yeah. So here we have the proposed VMT results. As mentioned, VMT is measured by resident, also known as per capita, or by employee. As shown here, the population for both residents and employees is much higher in the recommended and alternative scenarios compared to adopted. And in general, the recommended and alternative scenarios have a reduction in average commute trip length as compared to the adopted scenario. As a result, the recommended and alternative scenarios have a lower VMT per capita and VMT per employee. This slide is a good depiction on how simultaneous land use and mobility planning can result in a successful community plan. On the left, you can see the population differences for each alternative. Purple is residents and gray is employees. And you might assume that with the increase in population, that would also correlate to a higher VMT per capita. However, with proper land use and mobility planning, there are more mobility options that will convert single occupancy trips to other modes of transportation. This will reduce the number of vehicle trips and the average trip length, which equates to lower VMT. In summary, with proper planning and the community can still grow and have a minimal impact in the transportation network. Now we'll jump into the travel times. Mira Mesa Boulevard currently takes approximately 24 minutes to travel eastbound from end to end in the PM peak and 26 minutes to travel westbound in the AM peak. The future and recommended alternative scenarios assumed a transit-only lane on Mira Mesa Boulevard. This is a conservative approach to the roadway constraints, as the flexible lane could end up being a designated HOV lane. The model also accounted for the future Carroll Canyon Road alignment, which is anticipated to alleviate some traffic off of Mira Mesa Boulevard and Miramar Road. Based on these assumptions, the travel time on this corridor would increase by 10 minutes for each direction during the critical peaks. Next slide. Miramar Road. You can see an increase in travel time of up to 3 minutes maximum, which would be anticipated in the eastbound direction during the PM peak. And finally, we have Black Mountain Road. It is anticipated that travel times would increase by anywhere from 1 minute to 6 minutes. The maximum increase of 6 minutes is anticipated in the northbound direction during the PM peak. And I'll pass it off to Amy for transit analysis.
Thanks, Yari. So for transit analysis, we again used travel time data so that we could compare it to the vehicle travel time, so that basically, again, to navigate from point A to point B. And we'll specifically compare a travel time across Mira Mesa Boulevard based on if you're in a vehicle or if you're using transit. And this transit travel time also incorporated an assumed wait time based on the bus headway or frequency. So that's just the time that you would wait at a bus stop, depending on when we would anticipate you arriving for your bus. So this slide shows the proposed transit network. Again, I think most of you have seen this already. There should be nothing significantly new. As a reminder, we're recommending a couple of tweaks to existing transit lines, flexible lanes on the various corridors, transit signal priority, mobility hubs, and then we also have the aerial skyway alignment and the commuter rail alignment, which would connect University and Mira Mesa communities. I'll highlight a couple of those items here. Mobility hubs are basically areas that bring multiple forms of transportation together into one location. Those flexible lanes, as Yari mentioned earlier, they're basically any form of non-single occupancy vehicle. So like Yari said, they could be HOV, transit only, they could be just dedicated to peak hour use, anything like that. And then transit signal priority, that incorporates advanced technology so that the signal communicates with the transit vehicle fleet so that when the bus is arriving at the signal, it would get alerted and be able to prioritize that transit movement. So here you have the difference in travel times on Mira Mesa Boulevard if you were to take your car versus if you were to use transit. And again, the scenario assumes basically 2 general purpose travel lanes in each direction for the majority, and then 1 transit lane in each direction. And again, that is not definitive that it would be a transit only lane, it is just a flexible lane, but we modeled it as a transit lane as basically our worst case scenario, meaning that all vehicles are squished into the 2 travel lanes in each direction. So let's compare starting with the eastbound direction, the travel time for the AM peak. So for vehicles, it would be about 21 minutes under the recommended scenario. And then for transit, if you were taking the rapid route, it would also be 20 minutes around the same time. Or for some of the more local routes, it would be an additional 7 minutes for the non-rapid routes. And this can definitely be seen as a win for transit. Typically, the biggest deterrent for people not taking transit is that the travel time isn't competitive with driving your own car. And so if it's not competitive, then it's a lot easier to sit in the comfort of your own car than take transit. Now let's look at the critical direction during the AM peak. So here we're anticipating 36 seconds. If you can click one, yeah, there we go. 36 minutes from end to end, and taking transit would still be anticipated to take between 20 and 27 minutes, depending on your bus route. And here, I mean, not only is the transit option competitive, but it's actually saving you up to 16 minutes of time. So I also want to note that reliability in the travel time for transit as compared to vehicle, especially when you have this transit only lane. So you could click to the next animation. Yeah, so for vehicles, it can take anywhere from 19 to 36 minutes to travel by car. That's a difference in 15 minutes that it can vary. Whereas for transit, when you have that transit only lane, the difference in travel time only varies between 4 minutes. So that's a matter of if you want to risk, say, missing a meeting in the morning by 15 minutes or 4 minutes. The reliability of transit when you have a transit only lane is much more definitive. So for pedestrians, our methodology is called Pedestrian Environment Quality Evaluation, as we call it, PECI. The methodology factors in things like lighting, obstacles along the sidewalk, speed limit along the adjacent roadway, the distance between the pedestrian and the travel lane, ADA compliance, crossing distance and visibility at the intersection, and then the general traffic control, meaning if it's stop controlled or signalized. And all of these are measured, plugged into a point system in order to produce low, medium, or high quality scores for each roadway segment and intersection crossing. So this slide shows the existing quality scores for the community. And as you can see, there's a lot of low quality facilities, a good amount of medium quality facilities, and then little to no high quality facilities. I think there's a couple of green boxes, and we'll zoom in on this in a couple of slides. The next slide shows the pedestrian improvements that we've proposed, including enhanced pedestrian crossings, traffic calming enhancements, widened sidewalks, and general ADA improvements. So highlighting a couple of those on the next slide. We also assume that high visibility can you change one more slide? Sorry, thank you. We assume that all the signalized intersections will eventually receive high visibility crosswalks, which is considered a pedestrian enhancement. This increases the visibility of the pedestrian in the crosswalk. And then we also assume that lead pedestrian intervals would be implemented in future signal upgrades at areas where there's high pedestrian demand. So these lead pedestrian intervals basically allow 3 to 10 seconds of time for the pedestrian to enter the crosswalk during a walk sign before the corresponding vehicle gets the green light. So it puts the pedestrian in the crosswalk before the drivers start moving and increases their visibility as well. And then lastly, just a reminder that some of the traffic calming measures that could be implemented could be anything from neighborhood traffic signal or traffic circles to chicanes, speed humps, narrowed travel lanes, anything that reduces the travel speed and increases the environment, the quality environment for the pedestrian. So here you can see the resulting quality ratings as a result of the implementation of all of those enhancements. The next slide will zoom in so you can digest it a little bit easier, but in general, you can see a lot more medium quality facilities and a lot less low quality facilities. So this slide zooms in on the community core. So that's centered on the intersection of Mira Mesa Boulevard and Camino Ruiz. So the left shows the existing PECI scores. The middle shows the proposed improvements for the core. And then the right side shows the future scores as a result of those improvements. And again, you can see a good amount of high quality crossings now, and a lot less low quality segments have been converted to medium quality segments. So in the summary of the PECI scores, you can see that it's worth noting that the high quality intersection crossings would increase from less than 1% to 30% as a result of the proposed network, and the number of medium quality roadway segments, high and medium roadway quality segments would increase as well. So for bikes, we have another methodology. It's called bicycle level of traffic stress, or BLTS. And based on the type of facility that is proposed, we factor in various variables such as speed limit, number of travel lanes, the width of the bike lane, if there's parking in place, or if there's any type of buses that would block the bike lane. All of that is factored in again to create a score of the level of comfort for the bicyclist. So it's kind of the opposite direction of PECI, but a low score means that it's a low stress environment for the bike. A high score of 4 means that it's a high stress environment for the bicyclist. So here we have the existing BLTS analysis results. Again, a lot of red, a lot of high stress environments for bicyclists due to mostly speeds, especially on many of our major corridors in the community. The next slide shows all of the different facilities that we've proposed. We will, in the next slide, go over the different types of classifications, but here you can see a lot of high quality facilities that include horizontal and vertical protection for the bicyclist on most of those high speed roadways that you saw in the previous slide. So just a review of the different types of classifications. I know this can be a little bit confusing. So Class 1 facility is a path that's basically off of the roadway. It's not within the curb to curb width. It is typically a low stress environment for bicyclists since they're not adjacent to the vehicles. Class 2 is the buffered bike lane, and that basically includes horizontal protection or horizontal separation between the vehicle and the bicyclist. Class 3 is where you share the roadway space with between the bicycles and the vehicles. And we've also added the terminology bike boulevard. And that just means that with the Class 3, we've also incorporated some level of vehicle speed reduction or vehicle volume reduction on that roadway in order to make it a more comfortable environment. And lastly, Class 4, which was added more recently, it incorporates the horizontal separation of class 2, but it also adds a vertical element of separation for the bicyclists as well, making it a more protected facility. So here you have the resulting BLTS analysis. So any of those facilities that have the vertical protection creates the low stress environment for the bicyclists, hence the level of green that you see on the screen. So we're able to convert a lot of high stress environments for the bicyclists to low stress environments and provide more connectivity throughout the community. And here we're zooming in again on the community core. So you can see on the left, the existing BLTS scores, a lot of red on the major corridors like near Mesa Boulevard, Camino Ruiz, Montango Street. And then we've implemented some of those class 4 facilities on these high-speed roadways, and that converts those to low stress, level of traffic stress 1, green segments on the right side. So summarizing the bike network, we have proposed about 7.5 miles of class 1 facilities. I'll jump over to the other protected facility, which is class 4. And we've proposed about 32 miles of class 4 facilities. It does look like a decrease in class 2, but that's just as a result of converting those to class 4 facilities. And then lastly, the class 3 facilities, which is that shared space. We have proposed 25 additional miles of bike boulevard. And again, the bike boulevard incorporates traffic calming. It's not just putting sharrows out there on the roadway and calling it a class 3. And then lastly, we've summarized the BLTS scores, comparing existing and proposed. And the highest pieces to note, or the most important pieces to note, are that we've increased the BLTS scores of 1 from almost 0 to over 70%. And we've decreased the BLTS 4 scores, which is the highest stress environment, from 73 down to 20% in the proposed network. So that is all for the vehicle network, or the multimodal networks. And I'll pass it back to Tanner to wrap things up for us.
Thank you, Amy and Yari. Yeah, so really, I mean, the conclusions are kind of here in front of us. Basically, that we are aligning the land use and mobility. What we're looking to do is create a reduction in vehicle miles traveled and the subsequent greenhouse gases per capita. So as we increase more people and more jobs in the area, the VMT will grow a little bit, but what's happening is there will be less of it per person. And that's an important distinction. And basically, you know, again, just to underscore the fact that we are trying to create a mobility network that just moves more people. We are basically out of the ability to continue to widen roadways, you know, as the previous thought processes did, and so we're looking to create networks that are just moving more people efficiently, and then kind of in creating more mobility options. Again, we're trying to make transit a more competitive option. We're really enhancing the pedestrian and bicycle facilities. And as I think I stated earlier on, you know, candidly, with a mobility option like this, travel times will likely be impacted. But I think, as we've shown in the analysis and the travel in those travel time analyses, you know, they're not impacted as much as you might see. And even if, you know, that mode share graphic, maybe the modeling isn't able to quite, you know, grasp all of it or show the increases that we feel comfortable with, you know, at the benefit of creating transit only lanes and things like that. You know, that's really what we're looking to do. And then I don't know, Alex, if you want to take us through this, I can certainly do it. But basically the next steps, I think, from a whole community process, or the whole community plan update process, but specifically the mobility part of it, is to receive the input on tonight's presentation. And certainly we're going to be lacking in time to be able to do that. But I wanted to note that, you know, obviously this is being recorded, you know, so if any of you well, what we would recommend is we'll have as much conversation as we can tonight, but certainly just to reach out to us, our contact information is available, and to reach out to us over the next weeks and months that, we can kind of help describe some of the minutia or just all the information that is in here. We'll be looking to finalize the analysis kind of in this winter into the early next year. I think there's a discussion draft coming, as Alex noted, in the winter or kind of in early next year. And then we'll be compiling and finishing our mobility technical report into the spring of next year. And a draft EIR comes out next summer, and then the hearings and finalization of the full process in fall of next year.
Thanks, Tanner. Yeah, so I think we can start with the questions. I know Barry had some questions, and then there was Q&A, but I'll let Jeff go first if you have any questions or.
Yeah, I have a few questions. I'll let you do Barry's first, but I do want to, I guess the main thing, we want to make sure we're not doing planning by wishful thinking. And you've given a very high level presentation with a lot of rather rosy projections for pedestrians, for bikes, even relatively good for cars, given that you're doubling the population of the community. There must be a more detailed analysis in this. This is just a summary of. Are those more detailed analyses going to be available to us?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so we're going to be, the mobility technical report is really what's going to house all of the analysis, and you'll be able, I know we only covered a couple of corridors, but we've studied more corridors, obviously. And so all of that information will be detailed in the mobility technical report, and it'll take you from existing essentially to what was modeled, and then to what the future conditions analysis was.
Okay, when will that be out?
I think we were anticipating spring, so it would be somewhere around March is what we were hoping to have that available to you guys.
Okay, so I mean, they're going to come out with a draft community plan next month, but I guess I'd like to see that a little earlier than that if possible, so that we're looking at that at the same time as we're looking at the community plan changes.
Yeah, it's just we'll do our best. It's a lot of information, a lot of data and number crunching that we're putting in and kind of packaging into this document. But we can definitely we'll do our best to try and get it out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I would add, Jeff, that the community discussion draft is, it's just a Word document, some of the key policies, so I would say it's more like a pre-plan, and then so we incorporate everyone's input, and then we'll actually have a formatted, good looking draft plan in spring or summer. So yeah, there will be plenty of time for further input and analysis. Yeah. I see Justin's hand is up. Go ahead. And then we'll do to Barry and others.
So yeah, I was going to give you Barry's, but I don't see them in the Q&A anymore.
You want me to wait?
They're in the chat. I couldn't
Well,
put
they're
them
in the
in the Q&A.
Huh. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah. Do you want to ask the question, Barry? I see it in chat.
I have two there. The first one is your calming map. Looked like it was proposing traffic calming measures for Hillary Drive. We did a study on that area when we built the direct access ramp. And at that point, it was proven that that street didn't need traffic calming. It actually needed the reverse. It needed something to increase the throughput, because at peak traffic time, that was a parking lot. And then do you want me to jump down to my Miramar question, or do you want to take that one by itself?
Yeah, do we have an answer for that?
Okay.
Yeah, so I can kind of start and people can chime in from the team. But Hillary is the only access point for the community to get from a major transit station further into the community. So if we're trying to encourage people to take transit and potentially convert those trips to other modes of transportation besides vehicle to get into the community, we need to provide a quality access point to get from the transit station to other parts of the community. And so by doing traffic calming, traffic calming doesn't have anything necessarily to do with reducing vehicle lanes. It's just reducing speed. So we're not trying to remove a lane.
That was my point. The speed at peak travel time is parked. There were videos on YouTube. It is so bad. You average maybe 2 or 3 miles an hour. So I don't see where it needs to be calmed anymore. It actually probably needs work to make it more efficient if you're going to use it as an access to and from that transit center, rather than the current situation where Hillary is a parking lot and people are cutting through residential streets to try and go around it.
Sure, and I'll also just note that it might be a parking lot during the peak hours, but we're also trying to improve conditions for other modes of transportation throughout the day. So, we need people to be able to walk from the transit station to other points in the community safely at any point during the day.
Okay, and my other question was that when you were talking about these flexible lanes, the managed lanes, you said Mira Mesa Boulevard and Miramar Road. We saw the figures for Mira Mesa Boulevard. The Miramar Road is a different animal. And my concern is what you'd be doing there with flexible lanes. Again, getting back to the near parking lot conditions that occur on Miramar Road, plus the fact that unlike Mira Mesa Boulevard, which has a median system, there are no medians on Miramar Road for a very good reason. It's a highly commercial area, highly industrial area, and you will find large car carriers, 18-wheelers, trying to navigate those cross streets. A flexible lane might make that situation even more dangerous than it is now, as people try to get around if one of those lanes is tied up for transit for a long time, or if the structure of that managed lane. So that was my other concern.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and take that one. In terms of Miramar Road, and this is why we call them flexible lanes, is because we want to reserve the right to have that flexibility. And so for Miramar Road, it's really would function more as like a peak travel lane, where we would mesh the Route 31, so the transit as well as high occupancy vehicles. And so that would be our way of encouraging more people to carpool along the area, because they know that they would have their designated lane. There's really only one transit route that's traveling along Miramar Road, and so they would have their dedicated space to make sure that they maintain reliability and their travel times. And it can also be directional. So it doesn't necessarily, we understand that there's inflow and outflow demands. And so it might just be, a transit lane when it's needed in one direction during one peak travel period, and then in the opposite direction, in the evening peak period.
And that
But the
sounds
way
like
we
a scenario where you would need to take that center lane that's currently a turn. Otherwise, you've got a lane going in an alternate direction on the wrong side of the road. So those are things I'd like you all to keep in mind when talking about Miramar Road and solutions there.
Thank you.
Okay, we got a few more hands up. Justin?
Since we're talking about Miramar Road, and this is specifically what I want to make a comment about, she's right. I just want to add a couple things. There are a lot of driveways on Miramar Road, and I know when I drive down Miramar Road, which I've been doing for 15 years, I never stay in the northmost lane when I'm going west home, because it is so dangerous. You have to drive so slowly down that northernmost lane because cars are coming in and out of these driveways. So just be aware of that. There are so many driveways. I will not drive in that lane. It is very, very dangerous. That's how a lot of accidents happen. I've seen it myself. That's the one thing. The other thing is, I know there was some talk about having an actual physical median down Miramar Road. So we talk about understanding the details of what's going to happen on these major corridors. I would love to see, and I know we've seen some of these things, actual elevations of what this is going to look like. I know you showed some of those diagrams, but what is it going to look like on Miramar Road? Is there actually going to be a concrete median going down the middle of Miramar Road? If there is, I think we need to discuss that. That could be a major issue. As Barry mentioned, you've got 18-wheelers carrying cars. Miramar Road is now probably one of the three major automobile service and sales areas in San Diego, and it's only getting bigger. A lot of those tenants are actually have done quite well through this downturn, and I think we'll do well in the future. So that's what the area is known for. You're going to get more of those tenants. We don't want to discourage people from bringing in carloads or truckloads of cars. Not to mention it's industrial as well. We've got 18-wheelers of all kinds coming off of Miramar Road. So if we have to have trucks making U-turns, or they can't make left turns when they're going eastbound into the properties that are to the north, then we have a problem there as well. I'd also like to see what the vertical buffer is going to look like for the bicycle lane. Are we going to have those little cones or those things that are planted in the asphalt, or is it going to be a concrete divider? I've heard from other people, and I have no evidence of this whatsoever, but I've heard that trucks or cars traveling fast down these corridors that have these bicycle lanes with these cones that are fastened in the asphalt can actually tear those things out and they become projectiles and they can hurt people. So Miramar Road, as you guys know, I've seen cars and motorcycles go down the road 100 miles an hour. So that's a huge issue. And if we've got these little cones, I don't think it's going to do the job. I think it needs to be a concrete wall to really effectively protect the bicyclists.
Okay, thanks, Justin. So I think the word is, these aren't just roads with traffic on them. You've got to consider how people are getting in and out of it and how the road is used. Let's see, we'll go on to Craig Jackson.
Okay, I have a couple of points. First of all, the emphasis on transit, and you give the three examples of the existing bus lines, which operate, I think, at around 20-minute intervals. I've lived in 3 countries that have very good transit, and most things are 5 to 10-minute intervals, not the kinds of intervals that currently exist. This may be a Sandag problem, but this, I think, actually will be a disincentive unless we do get much more frequent transit on the transit corridors as you've designed them. And the other point I want to make is that I see 2 of the slides in the presentation, which actually show some things for Sorrento Valley Boulevard and Calle Cristobal. Those have been, for the most part, not considered at all. I see some optimistic going from red to green in the patterns that don't make any sense to me, because there are these nice little extra spaces between the bicycle lanes in some of the areas there already. And it's a little hard for me to understand, I guess, when the reference was created versus when the change is created. And I'd like to make one other point, and it is similar to Justin's, but the little rubber projectiles, as he's described them, or some kind of bollard that actually protects the cyclists, I think will be necessary, because if you look at the reductions in cars, per capita, it looks good, but per number of cars, I don't think it looks particularly good. And I actually think that the reduction in times intuitively to me don't actually carry much weight, because if they are based on the current transit schedules, you will be watching the buses go by with 1 or 2 individuals on occasion, and frequently with no one on board. And so I think you've got to deal with Sandag, you've got to deal with the frequency, and with regard to Sorrento Valley Boulevard and Calle Cristobal, there's a lot of housing along Sorrento Valley Boulevard and Calle Cristobal that will have people needing to go to the Mira Mesa Town Center or any of the other areas that all of us use for shopping. And there's no way to get there. In addition to which, for those of us who are now legitimately categorized as elderly, walking or bicycling is not really an option.
Thank you, Craig.
Excuse
you want
me,
to
Jeff,
What, Dorothy?
this is Dorothy. Someone has pinned hide my self view on my picture and I cannot show my picture.
Yeah, that's the problem they're having at the other end.
It cannot be fixed.
I just made you a co-host, so you should be
Okay,
able to,
may
yeah, share your
I
picture.
show my video now?
Yeah, I believe so.
Thank
We've got
It-
one more hand up.
Yeah, Julia.
Julia?
Yes, I want to make a comment on the time that you compared. How long does it take to get from point A to point B on Mira Mesa Boulevard using a personal vehicle versus transit? But what's not taken in consideration is almost nobody is going to be going from point A to point B on Mira Mesa Boulevard only. They're going to need to get off of Mira Mesa Boulevard and go somewhere else. So a lot of people live where or work not on Mira Mesa Boulevard, but on other streets. And most of the time, there's going to be no way to get there from Mira Mesa Boulevard or Miramar Road for that matter, using transit. So it's not going to be a viable alternative. Then let's say there is transit, then you get off one bus, you need to get onto another bus. There is a wait time. So to say that you're going to be saving time using transit, I think is quite false. So I don't think that in reality, using transit is going to be competitive when you consider that it's not just from point A to point B on this big road, but it's from point A to the Miramar or Mira Mesa Boulevard, then to point C on Miramar or Mira Mesa Boulevard, then to point D elsewhere.
Yeah, could someone answer that? Because there was also Alexa in Q&A said you say transit time can be less or equal to vehicle travel, but it may take 15 to 20 minutes to walk to and from transit station, which I think ties into what Julia is asking as well.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer that. And that's true. We just wanted to do a comparison of along the corridor, what that would be if you were, as you're riding transit and then as you're riding in your vehicle. But you're right, like it does not factor in, you getting off the bus and then continuing your walk to your place of employment. The travel time along Mira Mesa Boulevard also doesn't factor you being in a car and needing to, make a right or a left and then go into a parking lot or, get out of your parked car and walk to your place of employment. So it was really just us trying to compare, like within this segment, like what it would be with the two different options.
Now, I would also say by comparing the whole corridor, it basically shows the worst case scenario. Because if you're going the whole distance and we're saying it's 8 minutes different, well, if you're going half the distance, it's probably 4 minutes different. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we wanted to show that whole corridor, because it kind of represented the most conservative view.
Okay, so we got to wrap this up in just a minute. I do have one other comment, though.
Excuse me, Jeff, I still cannot make
Well,
myself
don't
view.
worry about it now, Dorothy, okay?
Okay, thank you.
The one last thing, you've looked at Mira Mesa Boulevard, but our experience has been that when Mira Mesa Boulevard gets congested, and although having shown a terrible increase, 10 minutes is actually kind of terrible as an increase to get from one end to the other. But our experience has been that people don't go on Mira Mesa Boulevard then. When it gets that jammed up, they go on all the side streets. So you'll get traffic flow on Gold Coast and on Flanders and on Capricorn and on Aquarius, on Cayo Cristobal. People will just avoid Mira Mesa Boulevard and go to all of the, go on all of these side streets. So have you looked at that all in your analysis?
Well, I would say one thing to note in that, as it relates to that, is the availability of Carroll Canyon Road. And a lot of what's happening is the fact that the vehicles do have another third east-west alternative in Carroll Canyon Road. So, and then I guess in terms of have we looked at it? Well, we analyze and look at the majority of the main roadways within the community. So, I think that's where we have looked at it is analyzing all of those other roadways.
So you've looked at Capricorn and Gold Coast and Flanders and Cayo Cristobal, and those will all be in your traffic study?
I can't say every single one of those Flanders is, but there's only there's a handful of like what we call collector roadways that are
Right.
analyzed.
Those are the ones I was listing, yes.
Mhm.
Okay, so I hate to miss anything that someone really wanted to ask, but we do have to wrap this up. So for any other questions, if people want to send their questions to me, I will have questions I will send to Alex and this team. And if you'll send your questions to me, I will add them to mine, see if we can get answers to all of them. You're also welcome to send them to Alex independently, but if you send them to me, I can try to collect them all. So I want to thank your team for coming. Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, Jeff. Have a good night, or I'll see you at the next meeting.
See you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank
Different Zoom
you.
link in a
Thanks,
couple of minutes.
everyone.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
Bye.